Her son slapped her across the face in front of the entire family. Ruth Langley, retired teacher and widow, didn't cry. Jordan, her only child and once trusted heir, laughed and reached for more wine. By morning, his name would vanish from her will, her deed, and every account he'd once accessed freely. She'd spent a lifetime as his mother. Now she was her own guardian. And when he came for what he thought he was owed, the documents would answer for her. The house on Fernbrook Lane still smelled faintly like cinnamon-scented candles and fresh laundry. Manufactured hospitality, Martha thought, not warmth. She stepped inside, carrying a deep dish pumpkin pie in one hand and a foil-covered tray of cornbread stuffing in the other. Her shoulder-length gray hair pinned back neatly, lipstick just a shade too formal for the occasion. She always dressed with intention. "Mom!" Andrew called from somewhere deeper in the house. "Kitchen counter's clear." Becca appeared a beat later, all bright teeth and stretched leggings. "Oh, you didn't need to bring all that. We have plenty." Martha offered a small smile, placing the dishes carefully on the granite island. "Thanksgiving's not a thing you undercook," Becca laughed, just a little too loud. "You always say that." Martha didn't correct her. She hadn't said it aloud in years. Through the archway she spotted the dining room. The long oak table gleamed under pendant lights, already set for 12. White porcelain plates, cloth napkins folded into tidy triangles, water goblets beside wine glasses. The places closest to the kitchen had name cards, each one hand-lettered, each one with someone else's name. "Where am I sitting?" Martha asked, her voice light, eyes still on the table. Becca gave a small, chirpy shrug. "Oh, we put you by the sliding door. Thought it might be quieter there. Easier to get up if you need anything." Martha turned. Near the patio door stood a card table, one chair, no centerpiece, a paper plate, a plastic fork sealed in its little sleeve. She blinked once. Becca followed her gaze. "We just didn't want you to have to worry about dishes. You already did so much bringing food. Less to carry back, right?" Martha didn't answer. Her grandson, Evan, 9 and flush-cheeked, came racing in from the hallway with 2 more silver forks in hand. "Here, Mom. Grandpa Rick and Grandma Susan need the big ones," he said, waving the metal like treasure. Becca's parents. Real silverware, real chairs, real inclusion. Martha nodded and turned toward the kitchen, pouring herself half a glass of water from the pitcher she'd brought years ago. Still here, still useful, like her. Just not invited to the table. Dinner came quickly, a blur of wine clinking, polite chatter, and the background noise of football humming from the living room. Martha sat by the door, knees chilled from the cold seeping in from the frame. A draft slipped beneath the curtain and touched the edge of her sensible shoes. The pie she brought was served last. Becca announced it like an afterthought. Oh, and Martha brought dessert. Not Mom, not Grandma, just a delivery. The slice she cut for herself was thinner than the rest. Martha took small bites, slower than necessary. No one came to sit beside her. No one offered to switch seats. At one point, someone handed her a napkin, folded awkwardly like a fast food to-go packet. It was floral, cheap, and tucked inside the plastic cutlery sleeve. It sat in her lap, untouched for the rest of the meal. When it was time to leave, Becca hugged her with the awkwardness of someone trying to be seen hugging. Andrew lingered, guilt flickering behind his eyes. "Thanks for coming, Mom," he said, voice soft. She nodded once. Of course. No mention of the pies, no offer to walk her to the car. Back home, she placed her leftovers in the fridge, untouched trays of what she used to call belonging food. Dishes you made for people you knew, not strangers who wanted easier cleanup. She slipped off her shoes and sat at her kitchen table. No centerpiece, just bills and a legal pad. She opened the drawer where she kept her estate folder, laid it flat on the table, and stared at the title deed. She didn't cry. She didn't rant. But when she reached for a pen, her hand didn't tremble. And in the silence of her own home, Martha thought, next Thanksgiving someone else can eat off a paper plate. The china had always been her favorite part. Martha remembered unwrapping each plate from tissue paper the day after her honeymoon, her late husband Charles grumbling good-naturedly about how fragile it all was, how impractical. "We'll break one every year," he'd said. "Might as well save time and drop a few now." They hadn't broken a single one in 40 years. Every Thanksgiving, she'd set them with care, layered place settings, burgundy napkins folded like little crowns, wine glasses buffed to crystal shine. Her house had smelled of sage, cloves, and rising dough. She'd made the place cards by hand, each name calligraphed in gold pen, placed with the same precision she used to ice wedding cakes, back when the bakery still bore her name. Not one Thanksgiving ever used paper plates, until this one. Martha sat at her own dining table now, back straight, fingers brushing the edges of the linen runner. It was a quiet house, too quiet. After the echoes of a family dinner hosted somewhere else, by someone else, with rules that didn't include her. She hadn't been asked to bring a thing this year. No one assigned her the green beans she always made with caramelized shallots, or the dinner rolls she let rise overnight. She'd called Becca the week before and offered. Becca's reply had been breezy. If you really want to, but no pressure. We're good. As if good meant full, as if full meant done. Martha looked down at the notepad in front of her. No grocery lists, no recipes, just the name of the estate attorney she'd met with 6 years ago, underlined twice. It was all still intact. The house she sat in, hers. The mortgage paid off before her 68th birthday. The deed never transferred, despite Andrew's insistence that it would just make taxes simpler if we put it in the trust early. She'd nodded at the time, said she'd think about it, but she hadn't. Because something in her had always known. She rose and walked to the hallway closet, the one where she kept the strong box and the soft flannel sheets. She pulled down a black binder from the top shelf, one of those zippered kinds with plastic sleeves inside, labeled on the spine in careful block letters, Estate MG. Back at the table, she unzipped it slowly. The scent of old paper and metal clips drifted up, faint but familiar. Inside, every page was in place. Bank accounts, life insurance details, the will, clean, specific, witnessed. A post-it on one divider read, "Update utilities, Rachel's suggestion." She smiled at that. Rachel, the nurse who lived next door, had helped her set up auto-pay and digital copies last spring, always polite, never pushy. The kind of presence that made you feel seen without being studied. Martha flipped to the section marked Title and Deed. Her name was printed clearly at the top, Martha Elaine Greer, sole owner. She ran a fingertip along the edge of the document. She wasn't angry, not in the way they thought she might be, but she wasn't passive either. She closed the binder and looked around her living room. The grandfather clock Charles had wound every Sunday. The quilt her mother had stitched for their first anniversary. The upright piano she hadn't played since arthritis crept into her knuckles. All of it disregarded by Becca as a little dated, in that offhand way people use when they want to sound modern and kind, but mean neither. She reached for a pen, scribbled a note to herself on the pad. Confirm with estate attorney, conditional transfers. Her handwriting was still firm. And if her seat at Andrew's table had been downgraded to one near the patio with plastic cutlery and distance for comfort, then maybe that was exactly where the fork in the road had come. She tore the note from the pad, folded it once, and slipped it into the binder's front pocket. Outside, a few brown leaves scattered across the sidewalk, late fall leftovers. No fanfare, just quiet dissent. But inside, something had started to rise. Not heat, not grief, just resolve, because if porcelain was too heavy for them now, then so was her silence. Martha started in the hallway. She moved slowly, one slippered step at a time, her fingertips grazing the painted wall where pencil marks once charted Andrew's height. 4 feet 2 at 7, 5'1" by 10. The last mark was faint, smudged from years of cleaning but still visible. Age 14, right before his voice cracked and his confidence inflated. She smiled at it for half a second, then kept moving. In the guest room, she paused at the dresser. Mahogany, carved handles, dovetail joints. Not a fast-assembled flat pack, but a real piece. Charles had bought it in '78 from a church fundraiser. They'd hauled it home in the back of a borrowed van. It still held the faint scent of cedar and lavender. Becca once called it depressing in a Facebook post. Martha had seen it, a photo taken without permission, captioned, "Trying to convince Andrew's mom to update this time capsule. Send help." There'd been laughing emojis, 3 LOL comments, a heart from Becca's sister. Martha had never responded. She'd simply switched her profile settings to private and removed herself from the family group thread. In the dining room, she passed her fingers over the corner of the buffet table. One leg bore a scratch from the Thanksgiving. Andrew knocked over a chair, trying to grab the cranberry sauce. He'd been 10, mortified. She'd told him it gave the wood character. Now she saw it for what it was. Proof of life, of laughter, of permanence. Martha turned toward the fireplace, its bricks still chipped from the year Charles insisted on hanging stockings with masonry nails. She reached up to adjust a photo frame on the mantel, her and Charles in Maine, windblown and smiling. It tilted slightly, she left it that way. She moved through the house like that for hours, room by room, item by item, taking mental inventory of what had mattered and what had merely passed through. In the attic, she opened a storage bin and ran her hand across Andrew's old Letterman jacket. She still remembered sewing on the varsity patch while he sulked about not getting a car for his 16th birthday. In the coat closet, she found the umbrella stand made from an old flour barrel, a gift from her sister, long gone. Becca had rolled her eyes at it once, muttering, "Farmhouse chic is over." Martha made a note on the back of an envelope, "Keep umbrella barrel." Back in her study, she opened the desk drawer and pulled out the title file again, just to be sure. Her name still sat at the top, Martha Elaine Greer. No co-signers, no trust adjustments, no transfers, just hers. Andrew had begged her to keep it that way once, said it would be better for taxes and simpler on paper. "You're the original title holder," he'd said, leaning in close over a coffee cup. "It's just easier this way." Easier for whom, she wondered now. She checked the notary date, still valid, still binding. She pulled out a fresh sheet of paper and wrote across the top, "Assets of sentimental and market value, preliminary draft." The pen didn't pause. Piano, buffet table, porcelain china set, estate binder, grandfather clock, quilt from Mama, flour barrel umbrella stand, Letterman jacket, attic, etc. When she finished, she folded the list and placed it on top of the binder. Then she sat looking around at the quiet weight of the house. The radiator hissed faintly. Outside, a crow barked once from the neighbor's birch tree. The scent of lemon furniture polish still lingered near the baseboards. It was all hers, every floorboard and fixture, every nick in the paint, every decision. And as Martha rose to draw the curtains, a thought settled, calm and unshakable. They see this place as old, but she saw it as loaded, with memory, with proof, and with power. Because if Andrew and Becca had already begun erasing her in public, then they had no idea what she was about to remove quietly, legally, and without apology. The group text buzzed through around 9:04 a.m., just as Martha was stirring milk into her tea. A photo, then another, then a third, one wide shot of the Thanksgiving table, one of Andrew carving the turkey, one of Becca's parents holding Evan between them like a trophy. Caption, "Grateful for 4 generations under one roof. Blessed. Greer family first." Martha wasn't in a single frame. She scrolled through slowly, her thumb steady. A group message followed. "Thanks everyone for such a warm, beautiful evening. Love you all, Becca and Andrew." No names, no tags, no mention of the pies, no mention of her. Just digital confetti tossed over erasure. Martha muted the thread and set her phone face down on the kitchen table. She didn't sigh. She didn't roll her eyes. She just took another sip of tea. And then the doorbell rang. She frowned, glancing toward the window. No one was scheduled. No one ever really came by anymore. She opened the door to find Rachel, her next-door neighbor, in scrubs and sneakers, holding a foil-covered plate and a Tupperware tub stacked with rolls. "Hi, Miss Greer," Rachel said, wind in her curls. "We had way too much food last night. Thought maybe you'd like a second round." Martha blinked, then opened the door wider. "Only if you sit while I eat," she said. Rachel smiled. "Deal." The kitchen warmed quickly. Rachel sat at the table, pulling off her hoodie and tucking her legs beneath her like she belonged. She talked about her nephew setting the oven mitt on fire, her mom crying over sweet potato casserole, and her dad insisting on watching the dog show instead of the game. Martha listened, really listened. Not the performative nodding that passed for family interaction these days, but head-tilted, breath-matching listening. She laughed once, twice, real ones. "I used to make rolls like this," Martha said finally, tearing one open. "But mine were heavier, like little bread anvils." Rachel grinned. "You say that like it's a bad thing." They ate. They talked. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was earned. Then softly, Rachel said, "Your son's house looked pretty in that reel Becca posted, but I didn't see you in it." Martha's eyes didn't move from her plate. "Neither did I." Rachel didn't rush in with sympathy. She didn't offer a fix. She just sat with the truth. "That's strange," she said finally. "You were there, weren't you?" Martha nodded. "I was, near the patio with the paper plate." Rachel blinked. "They sat you at a folding table?" Martha shrugged. I was quiet there." Rachel didn't hide her disgust. "That's not quiet. That's exile." Martha reached for her tea. "That's history. Exile would be new." The warmth between them didn't dim. It just deepened. Rachel stood eventually, gathering her containers, hugging Martha gently. No performance, just thanks. "Next time," she said, "you're coming to our Thanksgiving." Martha smiled, eyes sharp now. "Careful, I bring heavy rolls." Rachel laughed. "Perfect, well, anchor the whole table." After the door shut and the kitchen cooled again, Martha stood in the entryway for a long time, hands loose at her sides. She walked slowly to her office, opened her binder, and added a post-it to the front. "Rachel, see if she'd accept joint account access. Utility cosign, water only, start small." Her pen didn't hesitate. Then, with quiet care, she removed the Instagram group message from her phone and dropped it into the digital trash. Not out of bitterness, out of clarity. Because if being unseen was the rule, she'd find someone who could still see her. And just maybe she'd start showing them the rest. The office hadn't changed much since Charles passed. Same roll-top desk, same brass lamp with the pull chain, same paisley curtain that let in morning light and nothing else. Martha sat at the desk with the binder open, glasses low on her nose, and a new legal pad beside her. Her pen hovered for only a moment. She crossed out Andrew's name, one smooth stroke, then Becca's. There was no anger in the motion, just finality, like scratching out a recipe that never worked no matter how many times you tried it. The attorney's office smelled like warm toner and lemony floor wax. A young man named Cody greeted her with an efficient smile and a clipboard. He'd reviewed her file already, said it was one of the most organized estate portfolios he'd seen. "I've made a few edits," Martha said as she slid over the updated draft, "just to reflect some shifts in circumstance." He nodded, scanning silently, then paused at one section. "You want to designate the property transfer to Rachel Nolan?" "Yes." He looked up. "She's not family." "She is. To me." There was no challenge in her tone, no apology. He returned to the form, then hesitated again. "There's a clause here under forfeit on contestation. You want to keep that in?" Martha nodded once. "If they try to fight it," she said, "they lose everything else. No second chances, no split down the middle negotiations." "It's enforceable," Cody said carefully, "but it will upset them." Martha smiled, thin and sure. "They've already shown me how upset they are by not seeing me." He made no further comment. When she left, the updated will was filed, witnessed, notarized, and sealed, just like her decisions. Rachel looked stunned when she read the envelope. She sat on Martha's couch, holding the letter in both hands like it might dissolve if she breathed too hard. This says I'm inheriting your house," she whispered. Martha nodded, pouring tea. "Upon death or declared incapacity. Conditional, of course. It's not a gift, it's recognition." Rachel's voice wavered. "But I'm just your neighbor." "You're not just anything." Rachel's throat tightened. "I'm not trying to," she began. "I know." Martha passed her the cup, steady and warm. "I've had people bring me flowers who never asked how my knees were. You bring leftovers and sit." Rachel blinked hard. "You listen," Martha said. "They don't." "That's enough." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was reverent. "I don't know what to say," Rachel whispered. "Then don't," Martha replied. "Just keep showing up." That night, alone in the house, Martha reread the signed copies, the new will, the deed revision draft, the forfeit clause. Printed clearly, in bold, "Any contestation of this will by a named or unnamed party shall result in total disinheritance and forfeit of all financial and property claims." She tucked the page into its sleeve, zipped the binder closed, and returned it to the fireproof drawer beneath the old quilt. She wasn't punishing Andrew. She was simply freeing herself from the idea that family was something you owed everything to, even when it gave you paper plates and polite neglect. 3 days later, an envelope arrived in her mailbox. No return address, postmarked in town. Inside, a folded printout of a meme, the same photo of the mahogany dresser from her guest room, handwritten across the bottom in looping Sharpie. "Still can't believe she won't let us help modernize." No signature, but Martha didn't need one. She recognized Becca's smug handwriting, recognized the insult disguised as interest. Martha carried the paper into her study, opened her binder, and slipped the note into a blank sleeve behind her will. She labeled it Exhibits, Tone, and Context. Her hands were calm, her filing was precise. Because if they ever came knocking with wide eyes and gentle tones, asking how this had all come to be, she wanted to be ready, not just with her answer, but with proof. The voicemail came in on a Thursday afternoon, right after Martha had watered the houseplants and settled into her armchair with a crossword. Becca's voice, chirpy and clipped. Hi, Martha. So I was thinking with the baby shower coming up in a few weeks, maybe we could help spruce up the house a bit. Nothing drastic, just a little deep clean and maybe freshen the curtains. Swap out some of the older pieces for something lighter, make it more welcoming for guests. Let me know. She ended with a sparkle of false warmth, the kind used in bridal boutiques and hostage videos. Martha didn't respond. Instead, she stood and walked room to room, looking at her home through Becca's lens. The older pieces were antiques. Charles's armchair, the one he'd napped in every Saturday, faced the fireplace. Her mother's patchwork quilt hung in the hallway, sun-faded and soft with memory. The curtains were lace, delicate, yes, fragile, no. Welcoming for guests? This house had held decades of holidays, church potlucks, birthday breakfasts, and late-night tears. If a few fake eucalyptus stems and throw pillows were all it took to impress Becca's baby shower brunch crowd, they could host it at a staging showroom. She deleted the voicemail and resumed her crossword. 21 across. Performative, 6 letters. She smirked. The next day, Becca called. I left you a message yesterday, she said, her tone light but practiced. I got it. So, what do you think? Martha kept her voice smooth. About strangers redecorating my house so it looks better on Instagram? I think no. Becca gave a forced laugh. It's not strangers. It's just us. Andrew and I. Thought you'd like to feel useful again. Martha's grip on the phone tightened, but her voice remained level. I feel useful every day, Becca. I don't need new curtains to prove it. There was a long pause. Then Becca said with sugar-laced steel, Okay then, no problem. Just trying to help. Martha ended the call without saying goodbye. That weekend, Martha drove to the hardware store and bought 2 new deadbolts and a door chain. The man behind the counter asked if she needed installation help. No, she said. I've done enough waiting. She installed them herself, one on the front door, one on the kitchen entrance. The locks clicked shut like punctuation. Definitive, final, clean. The next day, she moved the estate binder into a fireproof box and slid it under her bed. She made copies of Rachel's access forms and stored them in a separate drawer marked Secondary Copies, Witness Verified. She took the old key Becca had used during the summer for housekeeping drop-ins and tucked it into an envelope, wrote nothing on the front, placed it in the freezer behind the beef stew she'd made last fall. Let them try and find it. Monday brought another text, Becca again. We're just worried you're isolating. You haven't replied to the shower invite. Martha tapped out a reply. Don't worry, I'll show up, just not staged. She didn't wait for a response. She already knew the tone it would carry. Later that evening, Rachel stopped by to return a book she'd borrowed. She noticed the new locks right away. Something happen? No, Martha said, closing the door behind her. Just felt like the wrong people were getting too comfortable. Rachel raised an eyebrow but didn't pry. Martha handed her a tin of lemon shortbread. For your shift. Rachel smiled. You always make it feel like home in here. Martha's voice was quiet but resolute. That's because it is. In the dark, alone again, Martha sat in her living room and looked around, not with nostalgia but with inventory. Everything she saw had either been earned or endured, and if Becca wanted to curate a backdrop for admiration, she could find another gallery. Because this house wasn't a showroom. It was a legacy. And starting now, entry required more than blood. Andrew called from the car, speakerphone echoing slightly, the rush of air conditioning hissing beneath his voice. Hey, Mom, can we talk? I feel like things have gotten weird. Martha sat at her kitchen table, slicing apples for a cobbler she'd decided to make on impulse. Not for company, just because she still could. I'm listening, she said, calm as the paring knife in her hand. I mean, Becca told me about the locks and the text you sent about the baby shower. She's kind of upset. Martha set a slice aside. She'll recover. Andrew exhaled, more annoyance than breath. We've always planned to keep you involved, he said like he was offering a consolation prize. It's not like we've written you off. You're still family. Martha's hand paused over the bowl. Really? She said, voice even. Then name one thing, just one, you've done this year to include me. Not out of obligation, not for show, something meaningful. A long pause, the kind that sours over speakerphone. Well, we invited you to Thanksgiving. To sit near the patio with a paper plate? She interrupted. Try again, he fumbled. I mean, the kids love seeing you. I dropped off birthday gifts. No one invited me in. Another pause, longer this time. I'm just saying you're making this into a whole thing, he muttered. "You're being dramatic." Martha smiled faintly. There it was. The word women like her, widowed, quiet, inconvenient, got handed when they dared to speak plainly. "And Becca's parents don't need all this emotion," Andrew added. "They're very laid back. Maybe you could try that." Martha's voice stayed cool, but her words sharpened like the knife edge. She sat down gently on the counter. "That's exactly why I'm done being decorative." "What does that even mean?" "It means I'm not here to be a prop in someone else's version of a happy family. I raised you in this house. I built traditions. I showed up. I invested. And now you expect me to sit quietly in the wings like a relic you dust off for pictures? That's not fair," Andrew said. "You're overthinking this." She stepped to the sink and rinsed her hands. "No, Andrew. I'm finally thinking clearly." He went quiet. She didn't feel the silence for him. Eventually he tried again, voice smaller. "Look, we can talk more later. I just wanted to check in." "No need," Martha said. "You've told me everything I needed to know." Click. She ended the call. That night she opened her estate binder again. Not out of paranoia, but assurance. She reread the documents, scanned the witness signatures, reviewed the contingency clauses. Not because she doubted them, but because she no longer doubted herself. The next morning a package arrived. No return address. Inside was a copy of Modern Interiors Monthly, bookmarked to an article titled 10 Ways to Say Goodbye to Grandma's Style Without Guilt. Martha didn't laugh. She didn't rage. She clipped the page and filed it neatly in the same sleeve as Becca's Facebook post. Exhibit B. Tone, pattern, intent. Let them build their case. She was building hers. Later, she sat on the back porch with a glass of iced tea, the sun soft behind the trees. Rachel passed by on her way to her shift and waved. "You okay?" she called out. Martha lifted her glass. Clearer than ever. Rachel smiled. "Good. Keep going." Martha nodded, her eyes fixed on the horizon, because next time someone asked her to make space, she'd ask for a signature first. Rachel found the envelope just after her morning shift, tucked under the ceramic pot of rosemary on her porch. Martha's handwriting, unmistakable, clean and upright like everything she did. No stamp, no address, just Rachel. She stepped inside, scrub top still creased from hours at the hospital, and peeled it open carefully. The first page was a folded note card, the kind with embossed borders and thick cardstock. Inside, in blue ink, was a line that hit like the warmth of tea after too many cold days. Not all family is inherited. Some is chosen. Rachel swallowed, throat tight. She unfolded the second sheet, denser, typed, formal at first glance, but unmistakably personal. A letter of intent. It outlined a future transfer of property, conditional ownership, right of use, limited co-authority on household matters. A quiet beginning to something weighty and rare. Rachel stared at the document for a full minute before lowering it into her lap. Then she exhaled. Not because she was ready, she wasn't, but because it was too sacred not to sit with. That evening, she walked next door and knocked gently. Martha opened the door like she'd been expecting her. Rachel stepped inside, wordless for a long moment. "This says you're giving me your house," she said finally, holding the letter out like proof she still wasn't sure she deserved. "I'm giving you the chance to be its future," Martha replied. "There's a difference." Rachel's brows furrowed. "But why me?" Martha gestured toward the kitchen. "Sit, I'll tell you." They sat in silence while the kettle warmed. When the tea was steeped and poured, Martha looked across the table. "You've walked in when you weren't asked. You've brought food when you didn't have to. You never made me explain why things felt off. You just stayed long enough for it to feel normal again." Rachel's mouth parted, unsure what to say. Martha went on. "This house has seen love. Real love. Not holiday gloss, not magazine staging, love that raised a child, buried a husband, rewrote traditions. It deserves more than storage rights and polite decline." Rachel's voice cracked. I don't know if I'm enough for that." "You're not," Martha said plainly. Rachel blinked. "Not yet," Martha continued, "but you could be. And I've learned that planning for people to grow is a better investment than hoping they'll change." Silence filled the room again, but this time it wasn't hesitant. It was reverent. Then Martha stood, went to the hallway drawer, and pulled out a file labeled Utilities Access Forms. She placed it gently on the table. "Electric, water, internet. I'm adding your name on 3 and making you secondary contact on 2. I've already made the calls. Just need your ID." Rachel looked down at the folder. Martha, start small, Martha said. This isn't a handoff, it's a hand extended. Rachel reached across the table, took her hand, held it, and Martha didn't flinch. That night, Rachel lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The note was beside her on the nightstand, the ink already memorized. Not all family is inherited. Some is chosen. She didn't know exactly how to carry that kind of legacy, but she knew this. She would learn. Meanwhile, across town, Andrew opened his laptop, clicked an email from Becca, and frowned at the subject line. Just found another property cosign possibility. He clicked inside. Was a photo attachment of Martha's house, slightly filtered, circled with a digital annotation. Prime lot. Timing matters. No message. Just a question in the air. Neither of them had said aloud yet, but Martha had already answered it. In writing. Becca arrived without warning on a Tuesday afternoon. Her SUV angled in the driveway like it couldn't quite commit to staying. She knocked once, then twice more, sharp, businesslike taps that made Martha glance at the clock before she opened the door. "Hi," Becca chirped, sunglasses perched on her head, latte in hand, smile tight. "I was in the area. I thought I'd stop in." Martha didn't return the smile. "You're in?" Becca stepped inside, surveying the hallway as if checking for clutter. "I've been thinking, with the baby shower and everything, maybe it's time we had a real conversation about the future." Martha tilted her head. "Whose future?" Becca laughed lightly, brushing invisible lint off her sweater. "Yours, of course. I mean, eventually there will be changes, right? Just trying to plan ahead, that's all this is." Martha closed the door behind her. "Let's keep this short." Becca walked slowly down the hallway, eyes flicking across the furniture like she was pricing it. Her gaze lingered on the glass front hutch filled with heirloom china, then on the grandfather clock, then toward the closed door of Martha's study. She stopped. "What's in there?" she asked, all casual brightness. Martha stepped in front of her. "My private paperwork," she said. "And before you ask, yes, it's locked." Becca blinked, caught off guard by the firmness. "I wasn't asking to see anything," she said quickly. "Just thought maybe we could sit and talk about the bigger picture. No pressure." Martha led her into the kitchen without responding. They sat across from each other at the table, the same one where Rachel had held her hand a week ago with quiet reverence. Now the air felt different, colder, thinner. Becca placed her latte down gently, like setting a prop before a monologue. "We've just been thinking," she began. "Maybe it would be easier for everyone if you considered downsizing. Something with less upkeep, maybe closer to the center of town. You'd still be totally independent, of course." Martha raised an eyebrow. "Easier for whom?" Becca laughed again, too quickly. "Well, you know, less stress for you, less isolation. Plus, Andrew's been doing some research on how complicated things can get if property transitions aren't planned properly." Martha leaned back slightly in her chair. "I already started the process," she said. Becca's smile faltered. "Oh," Martha nodded. "Just didn't involve you." Becca sat up straighter, her jaw tightening. "That's a little... Don't you think we should be part of those conversations? I mean, we're your family." Martha's voice remained steady. "I've had enough conversations with people who speak over me. I'm choosing the ones who sit and listen now." Becca opened her mouth, then closed it again. She reached for her latte but didn't sip. "There's no need to make this adversarial," she said at last, the edge behind her words dressed in sugar. Martha smiled thinly. "Agreed." Becca stood, purse slung over her shoulder in one practiced motion. "We just wanted to help." Martha rose with her, walking her back to the door. "I know," she said, "but sometimes help comes with a price tag, and I've already paid enough." She opened the door. Becca hesitated, then stepped out onto the porch. "You'll regret shutting us out, you know." Martha didn't flinch. "Maybe, but it won't be because I didn't read the fine print." She closed the door gently and locked it. That night, Martha moved her estate binder to a new location, a metal lockbox tucked behind the false panel in her bedroom armoire. She labeled it, "Final Draft, No Revisions." As she slid the drawer shut, she heard a phone buzz on the kitchen counter. A message from Andrew. "Hey, heard Becca came by. Let's all take a breath, okay?" Martha didn't reply. Instead, she sat at her kitchen table with a fresh cup of tea and looked out the window. The garden was overgrown, a little wild, but it was hers. And tomorrow she'd start planting something new. The kind of growth you didn't post about. the kind you prepared for in silence. The title sat on the table, waiting for her. A thick manila folder already opened, its contents fanned neatly, transfer documents, notarized verification forms, and a clean copy of the deed with Rachel's name typed beside hers. Smaller, but official. Not yet in bold, but soon. Martha smoothed the paper with one hand and picked up the pen with the other. No hesitation, no tremor. Her signature landed in 3 places, graceful and clean. It looked like someone who knew exactly what she owned and who she was giving it to. It didn't feel like erasure, it felt like authorship. The notary, a middle-aged woman with a neutral expression and mauve lipstick, gathered the pages and slid them back into the envelope. "Transfer is binding," she said. "Effective upon death or legal incapacitation, but full access starts immediately as you requested." Martha nodded. The woman paused. "You're sure?" "Absolutely." The envelope disappeared into a leather briefcase. The door clicked behind her. And just like that, it was done. The next stop was quieter. Martha drove herself to the bank, walked through the frosted glass doors like she had hundreds of times before, and met with the retirement account manager. She handed him a sealed envelope labeled Beneficiary Change Form. He looked up. "Want me to go over this with you?" "No," Martha said steady. "It's been reviewed." He flipped it open anyway, scanning quickly, then slower. "You've removed your son from all listed allocations?" "Yes." "And redirected the funds to the Franklin Township Public Library and the Regional Meals on Wheels chapter?" She nodded once. He hesitated. "That's a substantial shift." "So is realizing who your legacy actually feeds." He didn't ask more. He stamped the form, filed the paperwork, and thanked her for her continued trust in their institution. Rachel found out 3 days later when Martha handed her a second envelope, thinner, hand-labeled in blue ink. Transparency. Inside was a single-page summary of the updated financial directives. Rachel read it standing in the foyer, her jacket still on, one boot half untied. She looked up slowly, stunned. "This says you changed your retirement beneficiaries?" "It does, and it doesn't say me." "It shouldn't," Martha said. "That's not your burden to carry. This isn't a trade." Rachel's eyes welled. "You gave me the house, now you're giving everything else away." "I'm giving it where it will last," Martha replied. "Where it won't be filtered, flipped, or posted with a caption about finally modernizing the space." She took the page back gently and set it on the table. "People think legacy means keeping bloodlines intact, but it really means making sure what you worked for doesn't die with you." Rachel sat down, shoulders heavy. "I don't even know what to say." "You don't need to say anything. You just need to live here like it was given, not claimed." Silence hung between them. Then Rachel whispered, "You should know. Andrew called me." Martha looked up. "What did he want?" "To understand what you're going through." That's how he phrased it. Martha smiled without warmth. "Understanding doesn't start with phone calls to other people." Rachel hesitated. "Do you want me to block him?" "No," Martha said. "Let him watch." Later that evening, Martha stood in her front yard, rake in hand, clearing the last of the fall leaves from the garden beds. The porch light clicked on behind her. Rachel appeared in the doorway holding 2 mugs of cider. Martha joined her on the steps. The yard was clean now, bare but ready. "I started the paperwork for the garden permit," Rachel said, "the one you mentioned, to make it official." "Good," Martha replied, sipping. "This place should grow something again." Rachel smiled, eyes shining. But inside the house, the phone rang twice and went to voicemail. Andrew's voice, tiny and uncertain. "Hey, Mom, just wanted to check in. I know things got kind of tense, but we're still family, right? Let's talk soon." Martha didn't return the call. Instead, she opened her filing drawer, found a fresh manila folder, and labeled it with 3 quiet words, "For the next owner." And beneath that, in smaller print, "Built, not bought." The voicemail arrived just before sunrise. Martha saw the missed call when she brought her tea to the window. The light on the machine blinked with a rhythm too hopeful to be random. She pressed play, not expecting a miracle. Andrew's voice, hushed and urgent. "Hey, Mom, I know you're angry or hurt or something. I just wish we could talk before you make everything official. I didn't mean for things to get so far. Becca and we never wanted you to feel shut out." A long pause, then a softer voice, thinner now. "You were always the glue, you know, holidays, everything. It's not right without you." Another beat of silence. "I'm not asking for anything, just 5 minutes. Please, let's fix this." Click. Martha stood perfectly still. The tea in her cup had gone cold. She didn't call him back. Instead, she opened a drawer, pulled out her stationery, the heavy ivory kind with her initials pressed in gold, and wrote a single sentence. The house never belonged to you, and neither does my time. No salutation, no sign-off, just the truth delivered clean. She sealed it, addressed the envelope, and sent it by post. Let it arrive like reality, late, sharp, and unavoidable. The flowers came the next day. A generic bouquet, roses, baby's breath, a few wilted peonies, as if romance could be retrofitted for redemption. The card attached was embossed in silver script from Becca and Andrew, with love. Martha stared at it for a long moment. Then she carried the entire arrangement outside, past the porch, around the back, and dropped it straight into the compost bin. Let them rot into something useful. Rachel showed up an hour later with storm windows in the back of her Subaru, gloves in her pocket, and a thermos of cider balanced in the passenger seat. "Ready to install?" she asked, already smiling. "Let's make it winter-proof," Martha said. Together they worked in quiet coordination, measuring, fitting, anchoring panels. Rachel took the taller windows, Martha secured the latches. The cold air bit their fingers, but neither complained. The house began to seal itself, one frame at a time. "Did you get flowers today?" Rachel asked eventually, briefly. Martha replied, sliding a latch into place. Rachel looked up. "Where are they?" "Becoming mulch." Rachel grinned. "Poetic. They'll bloom better that way." As they fitted the final window, Rachel glanced around the living room. The space felt different now. Insulated, yes, but also defined. No room left for drafts, no gaps left for second chances. "You know," Rachel said, wiping her hands on her jeans, "I think this is the first time I've ever helped secure someone else's house before it was mine." Martha didn't respond right away. She was adjusting the curtain back into place, smoothing the fabric as if sealing off a past she no longer owed her breath to. Finally, she said, "You're not just securing it, you're inheriting it. In pieces. Every task is a handoff." Rachel's voice softened. "That's a lot to carry." Martha looked out the newly sealed window, where a leaf skittered along the sidewalk and caught against the curb, holding steady. "Yes," she said. "It is. But it's lighter than waiting to be wanted." That evening, alone again, Martha folded a final document into the fireproof lockbox, a handwritten addendum labeled Emotional Inventory. Inside, a list, only 5 items. The last family dinner where I was heard. The first time I said no without guilt. The moment I recognized silence as power. The friend who knocked without asking. The house that stayed even when the people didn't. She closed the lid, turned the key, and walked to the window where her reflection stood clearly now, framed, firm, and unblurred by frost. Let them knock, she thought. She had already sealed the door. It started with an email from a name Martha hadn't heard in years, Stephanie Chandler, Becca's cousin. A lawyer, technically, the kind who specialized in estate mediation and wore neutral tones like armor. Attached was a single-sentence message, just following up on some family concerns. If there's confusion or undue influence at play, we'd rather address it privately. Martha read it twice, then deleted it. 3 days later, Stephanie showed up in person. She came dressed like a whisper of control, blazer sharp, hair too smooth to move. She didn't knock. She rang once, then again, finger pressing down like she had rights. Martha answered in her gardening gloves. "Stephanie," she said coolly. "How surprising." Stephanie offered a lawyer's smile, tight-lipped, upward, empty. "I thought we could have a chat, clear the air, you know. How estate matters can spiral." Behind her, Becca hovered on the porch, arms crossed. Andrew stood a step behind, not meeting Martha's eyes. "I see we've brought the full delegation," Martha said, stepping aside just enough. "Well then, come breathe my air." They sat in the living room. Rachel was already there, folding laundry on the armchair, pausing only long enough to nod. Stephanie started with syrup. "We just want to ensure everything is happening in everyone's best interest, that you're not being misled or manipulated. These sorts of choices, property transfers, name removals, major asset shifts, can be emotionally confusing, especially at a certain stage." Martha raised an eyebrow. "A certain stage?" Stephanie tilted her head. "Cognitive capacity isn't a personal failing, it's a reality. And undue influence can look like friendship sometimes." Rachel's hands stilled on a towel. She stood slowly. "Excuse me?" Stephanie turned. "Oh, nothing personal. I'm sure your intentions are good." Martha stood, walked calmly to the hallway cabinet, and returned with a small leather folder. She set it on the coffee table with a click. Notarized medical clearance from Dr. Langford, full cognitive assessment executed within the last 30 days, she said, followed by a certified estate review with 2 witnesses, recorded, time-stamped, and sealed. She looked at Becca. "Want to see?" Becca didn't answer. Stephanie reached for the folder, but Rachel placed her hand on it first, gently but firmly. "You're the guests," she said. "Don't raise your voice here, and don't touch what's not yours." Stephanie sat back, her lips tightened. Becca hissed. "She's manipulating you." Rachel turned, voice calm. "If kindness is manipulative, maybe that says more about your definitions than mine." Becca's face flushed. "You don't even belong in this family. You're a manipulative social climber who showed up with a casserole and walked out with a house." Rachel took a breath but said nothing. Instead, she looked at Martha. Martha's expression didn't change. She didn't flinch. She didn't argue. She just let silence take the shape of a verdict. Finally, Martha spoke. "If you were looking for a case, you just made mine stronger." Stephanie rose. "We'll be reviewing this with our own counsel." "By all means," Martha said, folding her gloves neatly. "But you'll want to start with Exhibit A through G. I've indexed the rest under attempts to intimidate." Andrew opened his mouth, unsure whether to speak or retreat. Martha spared him a glance. "You always said you'd protect me when I got older. I just didn't know I'd need protection from you." He looked down. She walked them all to the door. No hugs, no handshakes, just closure. Later, as twilight dimmed the room, Martha sat beside Rachel on the porch steps, sipping cool tea and listening to the wind shift in the trees. "You didn't say a word back to her," Rachel said quietly. "There's no point answering someone who only hears themselves," Martha replied. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a fresh note card. This one she didn't read aloud. She just tucked it into the back of the folder before locking it away again. On the card, in ink the color of old fire, "Let them build their story. I already finished mine. Snow fell in light, polite flurries, like winter was trying not to impose. Christmas morning came with its usual hush, broken only by the creak of Martha's floorboards and the whistle of her old kettle. She stirred oatmeal on the stove, humming a hymn she barely remembered the words to. There was no invitation this year, no group text, no offer to swing by and exchange gifts real quick. Just the same silence she'd come to recognize, not absence, but avoidance. She didn't cry. She journaled at the dining table. She wrote in a slim leather notebook. The pen moved easily, deliberate. The entry read, "December 25th. Not lonely, just unneeded. But that too is freedom. Let others unwrap obligation. I'll unwrap peace." She paused, then underlined the last line once. Outside, through the lace of her curtains, she spotted a familiar SUV rolling past, sleek silver, overwaxed, Andrew's. Becca was in the passenger seat, sunglasses on despite the cloud cover. The kids' heads bobbed in the back. They didn't even slow down. Martha sipped her tea and watched until the car disappeared around the corner. She didn't stand, didn't wave, just turned the page. Later that afternoon, Rachel knocked once and let herself in. She carried a tin of molasses cookies and 2 thermoses of cider. "I brought bribes," she said. "Permission to crash?" Martha smiled. "Always." They sat by the fire, legs tucked, the crackle of logs filling the spaces where other people might have talked about matching pajamas and chaotic gift openings. Rachel didn't ask how the morning went. She didn't have to. Instead, she said, "You know the Jennings down on Carlisle? Their niece works at a title office." "Oh?" Martha raised an eyebrow. She said something strange. "Stranger than most things in this town," she said. "A couple came in last week asking about early approval for a second home, claimed they'd be liquid in under 6 months, from an anticipated inheritance tied to residential property." Martha didn't blink. Rachel added, "They didn't say your name, but the description, neighborhood, square footage, even the garden." Martha stood without a word. She walked to the hallway drawer, pulled out her tablet, and tapped in a few searches. It didn't take long. The listing was on a real estate speculation forum. Not their names directly, but a broker bragging about motivated young buyers with legacy equity pending finalization. The address listed for mail correspondence was Andrew's. Martha printed it in silence. As the page slid from the printer tray, she pulled a bright yellow sticky note from her desk drawer and wrote in block letters, "This is what entitlement looks like." She folded the printout into her estate binder, tucking it under the section marked heirs, not legal, not likely. Rachel watched her closely. You okay? Martha didn't answer immediately. She returned to the fireplace, lowered herself into the armchair, and stared into the flames. I used to believe silence was grace, she said, that stepping aside was kindness. Rachel leaned forward. And now? Now I see that silence only feeds the mouths already full, and I've been starving myself a voice long enough. She reached for her journal, scribbled another line beneath the morning's entry. They wrote me out. I rewrote the ending. Outside, the snow thickened, softer now, the kind that blankets, the kind that buries. Martha closed the journal, placed it beside her on the table, and looked at the fire again. Its heat didn't flicker. Neither did she. And across town, in a drafty realtor's office, a file sat pending approval, waiting on an inheritance that had already changed hands. Only they didn't know yet, but they would soon. The knock came just after dusk. Not urgent, not expectant, just steady. Martha opened the door to find Rachel on the porch, bundled in a thick wool coat, cheeks pink from the wind, and beside her a man Martha didn't recognize. He was tall, maybe mid-30s, with a soft jawline and kind eyes. His hands were tucked into his coat pockets, and his stance was careful, like someone trained not to assume space. Martha, Rachel said, a nervous smile playing at her mouth. This is Eli. Eli stepped forward and offered a gloved hand. Ma'am, he said warmly. It's an honor to finally meet you. Rachel's told me about your house like it's a place in a novel. Martha shook his hand, then stepped aside. Come in before you freeze. This isn't a movie set, it just has good insulation. Rachel laughed, tension melting as they stepped over the threshold. The living room glowed with lamplight and the low hum of the fireplace. Martha had laid out apple slices, sharp cheddar, and spiced nuts without knowing why earlier, only that the house felt like it should be ready for company. Some instincts didn't fade. Eli looked around slowly, not assessing, just absorbing. I haven't felt this welcomed by a house in years, he said softly, running his hand along the mantel, careful not to disturb the framed photo of Charles. It's not just warm, it's deliberate. Martha, still adjusting to the kindness in his tone, gave a small nod. It remembers. That's what a house like this does. You don't decorate it, you converse with it. They sat. Rachel curled into the love seat, Eli on the floor near her feet, Martha in her chair with the wool throw folded neatly in her lap. Conversation came easy. They talked about things layered in memory, Sunday comic strips, rotary phones, snowball fights, cassette tapes, and the death of real mail. Rachel told stories of night shifts gone sideways, patients who sang instead of spoke, and the one time she stitched up a dog by accident in a rural ER. Eli shared about his work in small-scale carpentry, fixing porches, rehabbing old crown moldings, restoring what others would demo. I don't like tearing down what was built with intention, he said. It feels like stealing. Martha laughed for the first time in weeks, a real one. Not sharp, not bitter, not filtered. She laughed until she had to wipe her eyes, and when she looked up, Rachel and Eli were both smiling at her like she'd handed them a gift. Later, when the fire had dwindled to coals and the tea had gone cold in the pot, Eli stood to help clear the mugs. As he passed the mantel again, he paused. You know, he said, not looking directly at her, you didn't have to share this place. It would have been enough just to be welcome. Martha stood, walking to the hearth. She didn't correct him, didn't downplay it. Instead, she said, homes are like wills. They don't mean anything until you act on them. She turned to face them both. I have one rule, she said, folding her arms lightly, for this house. Rachel sat up straighter. Eli nodded, serious now. Never forget to knock, Martha said. Even on doors you think are yours. Rachel blinked. Because of respect? Because of memory, Martha replied. This place has seen people barge in and assume people claim rooms like they were owed. I want whoever inherits it to remember it's not about possession. It's about presence. Eli placed the mugs gently in the sink, then came back to stand beside Rachel. We'll remember, he said. Martha nodded, then walked over to her journal. She opened to a fresh page. At the top she wrote, Family came tonight. Not from blood, but from presence, and presence doesn't expire. She closed the book. Behind her, Rachel reached for her coat. We should head out, she said. Don't want to overstay. You couldn't if you tried, Martha said. They hugged at the door, Rachel tightly, Eli carefully, and then they disappeared into the night, their footprints pressed clean into the snow. Martha stood in the doorway long after they were gone, not waiting, just anchoring, because what they'd left behind wasn't absence, it was proof, and that proof would hold. Spring arrived in careful layers, soft buds along the lilac hedge, the creak of thawing soil beneath Martha's gardening boots, a shift in air that smelled less like survival and more like something earned. It was Easter morning, bright but not boastful. In the backyard, under the maple that had once shaded Charles as he read to Andrew on long summer afternoons, Martha arranged the last of the cloth napkins, pale linen, pressed. Her silverware gleamed, real, not heirloom, polished for show but for meaning. A small folding table held pies and lemon-glazed carrots. There were no place cards, no head of the table. The rule was simple: sit where you feel seen. Rachel arrived first, of course. Eli trailed behind with a picnic basket in one hand and folding chairs in the other. Behind them came two nurses from Rachel's shift, a retired librarian from the next block, and a soft-spoken handyman Martha once hired after Charles passed. They filled the yard like sunlight, not loud, just present. No one asked about family. No one mentioned who wasn't there. They just passed platters and poured tea and leaned in when someone spoke. Martha sat with her plate balanced on her lap, china white with a blue rim, and listened to a story about a collapsed beehive and a grandmother who once made Easter bread with real anise seeds. The conversation wove itself around her, easy and unforced. No comparisons, no performances, just the click of spoons, the breeze across the garden, and laughter that felt like water breaking over dry stone. After dessert, Rachel stood and reached into her bag. "I have something," she said, glancing nervously at Martha. "Just a little thing." She handed over a small navy box, the kind jewelers use when the item inside isn't expensive but still sacred. Martha opened it slowly. Inside sat a single spoon, antique silver, delicate, worn at the edges. Her initials were engraved at the base of the handle. The patina glowed like time made tangible. "I found it at the consignment shop downtown," Rachel said. "It's from your original pattern. I checked. I thought you might have lost it over the years." Martha stared at the spoon, throat tightening. Her fingers curled around the handle like it was memory itself. "I didn't lose it," she said quietly. "Becca threw it in the junk drawer the year she hosted Easter. Said it didn't match the aesthetic. I never saw it again." Rachel's face darkened. "Well," she took a breath, steadying herself, "it matches this one." She handed Martha the spoon. "This is to remind you you're never a paper plate here." Martha looked up and smiled. "Good," she said, "because you were never plastic to me." The moment landed, soft and absolute. Rachel blinked hard and sat down again. No one clapped. No one moved to make it a spectacle. The silence around them felt like reverence. As the afternoon faded into golden shade, someone brought out a bottle of cider, sparkling, not sweet. They passed mismatched cups down the line and filled each one in turn. Martha raised hers gently. "To things that grow," she said. "Even after winter," Rachel added. "To houses that hold," Eli chimed in. "And to people who stay, even when they're not asked to." Martha looked down at the spoon in her lap, then back at the circle around her. "To new beginnings," she said. They all raised their glasses and drank. Later that evening, after the chairs had been folded and the table cleared, Martha sat alone under the maple. She traced her initials on the spoon with her thumb, the metal warmed by her hand. The wind carried a few petals from the lilac bush to the grass beside her. No voicemail would interrupt her. No card would arrive pretending regret. Just silence, the kind she chose. Inside, she opened her journal one last time. She didn't write much, just one line. "Some things don't need to be inherited, they just need to be earned." She closed the book, then turned off the